Lucky Lefty podcast, Onora boys in the building. Happy Friday. Your boys up here still trying to survive the invasion of the cicadas. Brought to you by Onora Whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com, that premium American whiskey. And if you drink, by all means, make sure you drink
responsibly.
You gotta drink responsibly. Whew, Left. Let me tell you something, man. Nothing like having closers. Nothing like having closers in sports. And today we want to know who are going to be the closers for Notre Dame football. Who's going to close it out, Left? Offensively and defensively. Usually the closers are a wide receiver or maybe a running back in the 4-minute offense. Or could it be a quarterback? Defensively, your closer is usually somebody that can get a sack or a big
interception. It's your Chase Young, your good night type of player.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that because last night I watched two of the best closers in the NBA close out a team like I do, no doubt, from the opening tip, and then they just took turns. Left, I just felt bad.
That's right.
How cats play. With their little toys and everything, the little catnip and everything.
Oh, you said it was that easy?
Oh, that was Luke and Kyrie. Yeah. Hey, dog, I'm tired. Go ahead.
They was hitting some shots where Ant was like, all right, this is too much, man. It's getting ridiculous now. Y'all making some BS. That's how good the NBA is, though, man. And how hard it is for guys to just be in the league a long time, because there's guys in there that can just do some things. It's like, man, like you literally talking about one of the most skilled players ever in Kyrie, one of the most gifted European basketball players in the last 2 or 3 decades. And on the other side, you got two, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. They play well off each other. It's just top of the league for sure.
Man, finals June 6th, they begin. It's going to be absolutely fabulous, man. June 2nd, Irish invasion. I believe tomorrow, it's Benjamin Morrison's camp.
Yep.
Out there, bro.
I'll be there working with the quarterbacks.
You're going to be working with the quarterbacks, Left? You're going to get the intel?
Shout out Ben Morrison, man, and Signing Day Sports. He got a whole operation out in Arizona. I'm happy for him, though, because Ben Morrison needs to build that recruiting in Arizona up because there's more athletes like him out here, especially at DB receiver position.
Yeah. It is it's one of those somber days, right? Unfortunately, the news came out yesterday, and we're still doing some digging and research. Bran Payne, running back for Notre Dame, had successful reconstruction from a torn ACL. Dr. Radican did the procedure. That means he's out for the season. Left. We've been talking about the depth in a lot of areas and how depth moving forward is really going to come to the forefront for a lot of teams this year. Health is always a contributor to success in sports. There's depth, but the depth is pretty young. You really look at the running back room, it's a young running back room. In terms of year?
In terms of years and unproven.
On the
field.
Yeah.
They're like our quarterbacks. Talent, but unproven.
It's like you talk about the offensive line being young. The running back room is young and talented. And you asked me a question in pre-show. You were like, yo, do they go move Devin back from the defensive side of the ball to the running back room? And initially, I was like, I don't know if there's a need, honestly. But as far as you're concerned, how do you see this playing out now with the depth chart, time, who it impacts, and the loss of what Bran Payne meant in the passing game, man, I thought he was one of their best blockers as a running back. He did a lot. This is not something that's like, oh man, we're fine. No, this is a pretty significant loss.
Yeah, it's one of those things that weigh on the team, and then when you look back and be like, well, what's the build up? This is a build up injury that it may not feel like it's a death blow, but a couple more things happen throughout the season, and then you think about this in Bran Payne injury, you're like, oh, okay, man, we've been through the ringer. And so I do think that it's an impact. We'll just see it later when you talk about the depth in the December and late November games when, one of our running backs may be nicked up, because that's just how the season goes. Not having Jabron available, now we're looking young with Aeneas and with a Keedron Ward in there, and then trying to find what the right balance is. And I think Jabron added a very good balance to a room that we felt was talented. And losing that, I think you lose some of that foundation. I mean, he's a spring game MVP last 2 years. He's been very consistent. I know Dina McCullough was excited for him this year, especially him carving out a role now that Aldrich's gone and being a little bit more of a seniority leadership in that room. I thought this would be a great year for Jabron to really break out and be the star that he's waited his time for. I think he's sat back in the right position to wait long enough for guys to kind of figure out, let them have their time, and Aldrich and guys before him and Kyron Williams. So this was kind of his coming out year, and I think it sucks that we're going to miss him.
Yeah, I think.
And then ACLs is a bug too now. ACL reconstruction sounds a lot crazier than just an ACL tear.
To give an apples to whatever fruit you want to choose, because it might not be apples to apple. He is not Jeremiah. He is not Jadarian. He is not possibly the future. He's not Kyrie. He's not Luka. But he might be Derek Lively. That's not to say you can't win without him, but you're much better with him.
Yeah, he's just much better with him.
You're much better with him, man. Absolutely.
Gaffney having some big blocks late.
Gafford. You're talking about Gafford. Yeah. Just those guys in that room, what they mean, to that room, to that locker room, leadership, all of those things that a lot of people might not be aware of. But now, you go into the fall camp saying, okay, we know where we stand. I don't prefer to have injury at all. But if you're going to be injured from a timeline standpoint for the athlete, it's better that he'll be better for the beginning of next season that it happened now. And it's better for the team that now they know going into fall camp. This is not something that happened during fall camp where you're expecting to have him for the first game at Texas A&M, and then all of a sudden, now we have to change things on the fly. So if there is the silver lining for him, and we pray for his speedy recovery and return to effectiveness, and I pray for his mental as well, man.
That's definitely the biggest thing that's suffering is the man's mental, being that there's no rushing ACL reconstruction surgery, so you're gonna have to do that time, and to see how in a year all your cohorts and coworkers and teammates and friends, how much a year progresses them in their playing career, their experience, widens that gap on that shared experience being out there together during the season. So it's a very huge mental thing to deal with, but I mean, hopefully he can come back and be a lot better.
And this is his second time going through this. He went through this in high school as well. So, man, just praying for the young man. Just really praying for him, man, because this in my opinion, it's going to be a fantastic season for the Fighting Irish, and for him not to be able to partake of it on the field is going to be very disappointing. But medicine, recovery times have all picked up steam, and it's totally different than 10 years ago, even in this injury. The way things are set up now, I'm sure they're going to have a plan to get him back up. Like, yo, Jadarian Price, when we heard Achilles initially, everybody was like, yo, that's tough. And he looks amazing.
Yeah.
You would never think he had an Achilles. The way he played, the way they worked him back in, like you said, they didn't rush Jadarian Price last year. They didn't give
No, they
him.
really didn't. They kind of just was like, take your time.
Yeah, they really took their time. They took their time, and they were blessed to have Jabron, Aldrick, Devin, Jeremiah. They had enough depth to be able to ease him back in, use him sparingly on special teams, along with some other packages. And then you see what he was able to do in the Sun Bowl. You look at him in the blue and gold game and how he looked. He looks like he's getting back to his freshman status. He's stronger. So, yeah, I think, he's going to be able to come back and still be effective in a Fighting Irish uniform. And we look forward to that day for the return of Bran Payne. Now, let's just talk about the impact on the running back room. Who steps up? Who steps into that role in the third down back? How do you see it playing out? And what do you think is going through the mind of Dylan McCullough when he looks at how he's going to break down and divvy up these plays?
Yeah, I think he probably hates to see that happen, but loves to see the fact that the other guys in the room can take on more of a challenge, probably more than what he would have thought going into the season in terms of volume and carries and expectations in the game. But it's almost putting a double expectation on yourself and on those running backs to take a bigger role of the offense.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think for a guy like Jeremiah Love, you can put more on his plate. A guy like Jadarian Price, you can put more on his plate. Those young two freshmen, you can put more on their plate. Whereas Jabron was such a heavy factor in terms of, in my opinion, what Dina McCullough had as a role for him in this season and in this running back room. I think that now, you double up on experience for those guys to pick up his sword in a sense. I know Jabron's going to be around, floating around the team, but it's nothing like leading the drills, being in team run, showing guys by example, and that's what makes football the hardest to find ways to get better, because there's not too many things you can do outside of practicing to be better. You have to practice. So when you can't do that physically, it's just a whole another dynamic that you have to take on, and I think Jabron will be better for it, but also Dina McCullough thinking third down. I'm thinking the young guys, putting Aeneas Williams in there, put a Jeremiah Love on these third downs. I think we've recruited well enough to replace that production. And like we talked about earlier, Bran Payne's style of running back is almost fading out in the Notre Dame recruiting trail anyway. Like, he's only got 1 or 2 more years for that archetype of back that Jabron is to even fit in the Notre Dame offense. See, we already got the Penn State kids switching positions. Jabron was on his way too, just because of how we're recruiting the position and what we want it to look like, how it integrates into a offense that Denbrock is setting up. And yeah, it's physical, but in a different way.
Yeah, I foresee that the promise, and someone in the chat asked, you were very high on Aeneas before he even committed to Notre Dame, just off his film.
That's right.
You've always been a high on him and always spoke about his versatility being his greatest strength. But then we had our guy CJ Procyse on, and he talked about watching him practice for a couple of days and was like, yo, who is this kid?
Yeah, you just be like, who is it?
Like, yo, who is this? And so, for people in the chat to ask why we're high, the people that have done it are high on him.
He passes the eye test for sure.
You know, you look at his performance in the blue and gold game, his ability, his versatility, and as CJ said, he plays bigger than you think he is. He runs faster than you think he is. He's quicker than you think he is. It's like whatever you think, he's better. He almost
Yeah,
has.
he's just better than what you think
He's
is.
almost like Kyron in a sense, because that's how Kyron was.
Yeah, he's just like Kyron. He's just like, man, if he gets enough carries and enough mismatches, he might really do something.
Yeah, Lucky Lefty podcast. We're getting ready to bring in our brother Cam McDaniel. He's going to join us today. And we were going to talk to him about something we started yesterday. But even in that, now with this Bran Payne news, we want to get his thoughts on the recovery. And of course, I already know what he thinks is best. I already know. I'm very interested in when you talk about someone that's going through this process for the second time. I'm very interested in hearing what Cam has to say about that. So we bring our brother in to the Lucky Lefty podcast. What's up, bro?
Yo. How y'all
What's
doing?
up, Cam?
What's up, Malik? What's up, Sean?
How you doing, man?
So Bran Payne tears his ACL, and Dr. Radigan does the procedure, the total reconstruction of the ACL. For you, because we know medicine has come a long way, right? And the death wish or the deaths that were Achilles tear 10 years ago or a torn ACL 15 years ago really doesn't exist today. Like, there is promise, even when these athletes suffer injuries like this that cost them a season. Most people still feel pretty good about their ability to return to action and to be effective or just as effective as they were. What do you think is going to be the greatest challenge for Bran Payne during this process of rehab, not only from the physical side, but from the mental side?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question. A lot there, but but really, yeah, like I think more than anything, the scientific and medical community is catching up tremendously to, I think, cutting edge performance and recovery tactics that it's well understood now, I would say, in the medical community that these ligaments have the capacity to grow back in ways that we haven't known for a long time. There's cutting edge surgeries out there now, different techniques that they're using. And ultimately, we know that like when those ligaments get torn, there's a capacity for them to grow back even stronger. And so I feel that now, because there's been so many of these, like people are really starting to see that, more and more. They're starting, and I still choose to know, which surgeons are ahead of the curve on this and which aren't. And I don't have all of that systematic info. But obviously some guys are really doing it right and they're coming back in ways that we haven't seen before. That was a lot of our conversation last year on some of these recovery topics. So I'm really enthusiastic about Bran's capacity to really make a fantastic recovery here. And then from just like the physical and mental side on like post-op, man, there's so much that can be done. Again, like I've referenced it over and over again. Direct pulse current, PEMF wave technology, like those are incredible modalities to be using to recover at the cellular level, to restore peripheral and central nervous system communication to optimal standards. Phototherapy is another one that I'm pretty high on right now. That is really cool.
You said phototherapy?
Phototherapy. They also call it photobiomodulation. So you're using, a lot of people would use like low red light energy.
You those red light beds you sit in.
Yeah, but there's even more like dialed in components to where like the red light beds are great. Like you can use those, but you can even have wearable technology now that you put on that ultimately is like, I've seen this in the form of a patch. There's like a couple companies out there that are doing this like non-transdermal. It's recycling the red light energy that your body naturally produces from its metabolism and thermogenic energy. So like if we were to put on like infrared glasses or goggles right now and look at each other, we would see like the colors of the Roy spectrum showing in the human body to indicate that we're warm-blooded, we're letting off that heat. Well, that heat gets released in the form of red light, and the body can reflect that back in with these patches and activate certain amino acids that activate certain peptides in the body. And you're turning on your natural ability to activate stem cells, activate certain peptides that are responsible for these healings that we need to collapse those timelines. It's incredible stuff. There's lots of good stuff out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, but didn't you also think, as it relates to football, there's still some archaic things that take place from just a mental standpoint? I mean, about getting injured and watching the team grow around you. I don't know how many patches and machines they got out there to help you get over.
Well, I mean, like, I know the University of Texas like uses DC pulse current for their athletes. I know the University of Ohio State does. I'm sure there's others out there that I'm unaware of. I knew SMU used it in the past. I've worked with them.
How different is it now compared to what we had with the red light with Rob? He'll do the little scanning machine and do the little stem machine. Are those outdated, or those didn't quite get the same things that you're talking about with these?
We actually had some good stuff that I was unaware of how good it was.
We had some stuff, yeah.
Of course. I mean, it's Notre Dame, so like they're gonna have like really, really awesome stuff. Like the Hivamab, for example, it wasn't a new technology by any means. This stuff has been around for a long time, but
yeah,
that was something that we used that I think it helped my hamstring injuries quite a bit. I was able to typically recover from hamstring injuries in 4 weeks with those guys, which the typical is like 4 to 6. So if it's on the 4 side of the spectrum, you're like really healing fast. And so I was able to hit those markers with those guys, say maybe sometimes a little bit before, like in between 3 to 4 weeks would be when I would go back out into the field of play. But when you implement some of these other things, I mean, like we've seen guys come back in a week, and I've never seen anything like that while we were playing. Nobody was recovering that fast. And so,
what makes it so hard though to recover from these ligament injuries like an ACL, MCL? Why does it take? I know the technology has been better, but there's still a lot of months that you got to sit there and not do anything too. So, what about these small tendons make it such a hard time to recover?
Yeah. Yeah, we say that they're small tendons, but at the same time, they're kind of like the main fiber optic cable that connects like the upper leg and the lower leg. So
that's right.
From a central nervous system standpoint, it's like
pretty freaking important. It's the belt that rotates the engine. Like
yeah, like you need that. I mean, it's not like you can't still have nervous system capacity down there, but you try to put force into that thing and the body's like, no. Like, we're not ready for that yet. And so I've seen some pretty crazy stuff with this. Like I've seen a UFC fighter who tore his ACL and never got surgery and continued to fight. And his, like when he went and got MRIs like a couple years later or whatever, and his ACL had grown to his PCL. And so his body naturally like
scarred over.
Yeah. Well, it didn't scar it over like to a point, but it actually healed itself and attached itself to the PCL. So it just
it did what surgery would do, just over time, sort of thing.
So if they did a surgery, they would attach the ACL back together. They would put the ACL back together. But it would be a reconstruction of ACL. This guy didn't get a surgery and continued to fight, continued to do his thing. And ultimately his ACL grew to his PCL, which is just the ligament on the lateral side of the knee, and it found a way. So this is where I kind of like this is where I get into like the biological intelligence factor of things. It's like, if you look at nature, if you look at like how like a plant will grow back after it's ruptured, if you look at how a mushroom will grow back after it's ruptured, our like the tissue in our nervous system is intelligent and knows like how to adapt, how to compensate, how to, like, if you're going to ask it to continue to do stuff, it's going to find a way.
Yeah.
So I guess getting into the mental side of things, like, that's the biggest thing, is like, I think the mental part of this is the biggest part, like outside of all the other things. There are, if anybody follows like the works of Dr. Joe Dispenza, or, I mean, there's several big names, I would say, like in that community that like some people may not be on board with. I personally have seen stuff before that like I feel like I can't deny. That's basically like, if you have the ability to see it and experience the reality of it beforehand. So like, some people might call this manifestation, other people might call this prayer. But the concept basically is, see your healing and live in the reality of your healing in your imagination, and your body recovers faster to that place because it's being neurologically programmed. Like your mind is essentially rehearsing the feeling of being recovered. And that's something that, like, you know, we didn't learn those techniques and stuff while we were recovering from injuries. I did not understand that at the time.
And it's not always their fault, you know. I mean, sometimes we don't have enough time in the day to really, you know, because everything is like, you got a 4-year window. It's like, how much can you really even, you know what I mean, get into it as much as you would like to.
Yeah. No, but these are just things that I feel like are the difference maker between guys that really make strong comebacks and the guys that don't. They just have this knowledge and information and are able to utilize that in order to, you know, collapse their healing timeline, create opportunities for themselves that are unique, that we see in the space of athletes recovering. So yeah, the biggest thing for the mentality piece is just to keep, like, if we want to keep it at a like lower level of talking about this, like, stay positive, continue to have optimistic thoughts about your recovery process, how it's going to go, feed that energy bucket, if you will, with the right sort of mentality. And ultimately, like, these dudes are recovering quickly, like we talked about, and it'll be cool to see, you know, how he's able to bounce back.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that you can't determine, and Shaun talks about it all the time. One thing you can't determine is a person's trajectory. You gotta let them get there. So we can't tell y'all that Jabron's not going to bounce back from it. Everybody has their own mental and physical journey through injury, and it's trash. I don't want anybody to think it's something easy to go through. And I think a lot of it is because it's only a small window of time that you get to play college football. I know it's been jaded a little bit where you get 8 years for some guys, but more likely you're going to get your 4.
Let me
go get your 4.
Left man, because I can reference this. I just did a full podcast this morning on this over on our church website, and we're just talking about it's a reference scripture, 1 Thessalonians 5:23, right? And we're just talking about people being so stuck sometimes in faith and powering through and ignoring the fact that you've been called to life and living it holy, that starts with a W, not just the H, and what that means, spirit, soul, and body, right? You want things, you want healing, but are you putting in the work from a health standpoint, a diet standpoint, an exercise standpoint to make sure that that manifests in your life? Like the mental aspect, are you putting in the work, giving yourself the right tools and using the tools to help benefit your mental as you go through life? And
that's just wisdom, you know, like that's what we call wisdom, because wisdom is walking in knowledge.
Yes.
Like, where somebody will say, oh, I know that, or I know eating healthy is good for me and it's going to make me feel better, but they don't eat healthy. So they don't know that. They really don't know that. They have a mental concept of what that could look like for them, but because they're choosing not to partake in that reality, it's a lack of knowledge. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So this concept of like wisdom really comes to life into what you're talking about there. And also just belief. Like, if you believe that you can recover faster than anybody else out there, or that you're going to have this crazy, you know, healing journey, and you're embracing it, you're surrendering to it, surrendering to the outcome, while also just like going at it with faith, going at it with a belief that your body is capable of healing beyond what people may tell you. Well, you are going to do the things that you feel led and inspired to do, and so there is a component of like putting in work, and then there's also a component of resting and what that decision is that you make, and to follow through with that in faith that's going to be the way. So
I know the fans focus on the physical return, right? Because I mean, that's really the only window we can look at it as, right?
Yeah.
But as Lauren Lando, the administration, the rest of the staff, like take us behind the scene of everything that really goes into a young man being able to, like you said, Left said, it sucks, bro. Like, yo, this rehab, all of that, it sucks. So what goes into, okay, physically, Dr. Radican performed the surgery, gave everything a nice baseline for recovery and growth, but everything else that goes along with that, the wholeness of it, like what makes all of that up, and what is the challenge for a program to properly give or set the right temperature for optimal return for the athlete?
So first off, Malik, how much time was spent with you on the mental and emotional aspects of your healing?
0. And I think that's a huge issue because
it's the biggest thing. It is the foundation of it all. Like nobody can convince me otherwise. Like we can talk about all the physical components and the surgeries and like getting the best surgeon and all that stuff. Like that's all cool. Like, yes, I get you. Like
it definitely makes recovery take a lot longer, in my opinion, having the mental side not being addressed as a balance to the physical. Like it's just straight physical, and you're in that hospital bed like, oh my God, I'm by myself. Nobody cares except these St. Liam nurses coming in. It's like, where's everybody at? You know, that's a huge thing.
It's an energetic game. Like, I mean, when we're doing placebo studies and we're telling people that they have cancer, then they don't have cancer, and then they develop cancer, or we are doing placebo studies and people do have cancer and we're giving them a sugar pill to recover, and we're saying, oh, this is a new type of medicine, blah, 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 it's going to heal you this much faster, and they just believe that, and then they heal. Like, guys, like, I mean, this is stuff that we're embracing more now as a consciousness, you know, more than ever. And that's the thing about me is I like both sides of it. Like I love, you know, the best medical procedures out there that are going to optimize like recovery and the physical components of it. But the foundational component, and this is just going back to like my own personal convictions as somebody that like is a believer in Christ and a believer in the concept of Christ in you as the hope of glory. Like that concept is powerful, man. And I don't think we understand the ramifications sometimes of what it means that, like, the scriptures call us sons and daughters of God. Like, that's wild. Like, when Jesus was relating himself like to being a son of God, like, they were wanting to kill him for that. And the scriptures are telling us that's who you are, and that's the power that, like, is in you. And we're seeing, like, people, like, start to tap into that in ways that maybe we've never seen before. And I just continue to be enthusiastic about the testimonies coming out of it. I've seen some of that in my own life, and people that, like, we know and love that are choosing to live in that reality, to where they're recognizing, like, they're co-creators in this whole thing, and basically, like, where their energy goes and flows is how their external world is reacting to all of this stuff. So when we're talking about I know this did not answer the question at all necessarily, Sean, but, like, this is kind of the direction that I feel like is important when you're talking about these things. Malik spent zero time at the time on that piece of things, and that is the foundation. It is the core foundation to all of this. And so I can't emphasize it or stress it enough. Notre Dame and, like, that program is going to do whatever they're going to do as far as everything else. They've got their team that has the plan, and they're going to go execute that from the physical side, whether I think it's the best way or not. Like, it doesn't really matter at this point. But, like, spending the time on the energetics of this is something that, like, when I'm working with athletes, it is the core foundational piece of, like, what we do. And yes, we're going to do the physical side. We're going to do actual recovery techniques. We're going to apply direct pulse current. Like, we're going to use phototherapy techniques. We're going to, like, work on your diet and, like, nail down, like, what all that looks like. We're going to look at fasting techniques. We're going to look, like, so we'll get into all of that. But the biggest thing is, hey, do you believe that you can heal? And not only that you can heal, but you can come back stronger than you were before. And once those athletes make that decision, our recoveries go very smoothly from that point on. When there's resistance to that, and there's a lot of doubt, a lot of negative talk, and all that's going on up there, a lot of head chatter is what I like to call it. And Malik, I'm sure you're familiar with the head chatter, like, days. I'm familiar with head chatter days as an athlete, where you're just sitting there and you're like, oh, woe is me. Like, I can't, like, this is what I was born for. This is what I do. And, like, I can't do that. I can't express myself as an artist in this way anymore. And it, like, really sucks. Like, that is a miserable place to be for an athlete that dedicates so much time, energy, and effort to their craft in this place. But to help them understand that, like, hey, this is part of the journey. Like, every movie that you've ever watched about athletes or athletics or whatever, there's always a point where they got to overcome something. And, like, or maybe multiple times, they got to step up, overcome. They're going through something that's uncomfortable, going through something that's not necessarily maybe something that they are enjoying at the time, but it's making them into the man or woman that they have to be in order to get to the end of the story and have achieved whatever they achieved and done whatever that they've done. So that's what I tell my guys now is, like, dude, just look at it like a movie. Like, you're a movie character and you're creating your movie. What do you want that movie to look like? What do you want this part of the movie to look like? And if you think it's going to be miserable, then it's going to be miserable. But if you approach it with a Drew Tranquil type mentality, I can show you how that guy has had a series of unfortunate events and made lemonade out of lemons in those scenarios in ways that, you know, most people could never understand. And it's because the mentality, it's because of the mental framework that man has developed, that ultimately nothing's going to stop him. And yeah, that's the foundational component.
Lucky Lefty Podcast. Cam McDaniel, former Notre Dame running back, joins us right here. He is the host of soon to be on patreon.com/Lucky Lefty Network Chemistry show coming soon, where he's going to talk about health, wellness, recovery time, other topics, life, culture, you name it. Chemistry is going to have it. We look forward to Cam McDaniel releasing that. I know there's an interesting conversation. He has a guest coming up that I can't wait to see their conversation about NIL and the impact of it moving forward. I can't wait for that to be released. But help us with this, Cam. We started a conversation yesterday, right? And I'm like, yo, you can say it's a take. That's fine. I was like, I'm worried about this first expansion playoff. I'm really worried about the product because I'm like, I don't know if athletes are used to the schedule that's about to take place and the different movements that are about to take place and possibly having to stay at a certain location after the game and practice from a different location and sleep in different beds preparing for the next game. It's like, yo, and how do schools get used to the moving parts and making sure that they figure out how to optimize the performance of their team? And I think about all of that, and I'm like, yeah, I can just foresee like some really big injuries, man, playing a big part in this initial playoff. And it's amazing because I referenced the NBA. Like for the last 2 to 3 years, the playoffs, they give us intriguing games and intriguing series. But look, if you have the stars playing, the games are going to be better. It just is what it is. And all of their stars seem to be injured, dealing with injuries, or sitting out, and it impacts series, it impacts matchup. We see the Celtics now being discredited for their path to the NBA final because of injury. Well, they played this team, their best player was out, and they played that team, and their best 2 players got injured. And for some reason, the NHL, as physical as it is, this is why I want to get into the dynamics of what muscles are used in skating versus running and things of that nature. Because I think it's fascinating because one would say hockey is just as physical as football. Like they're both violent, physical sports, right? Basketball is probably an outlier, probably viewed as the less physical, maybe viewed as the more strenuous on certain muscles because of the constant running. But it seems like injuries are more impactful with their star players in the NBA than, say, football or even hockey, because the stars are always ready to play and ready to go when it's time for playoff hockey. And I just find it amazing because from a performance standpoint, it has been documented because of the muscles and the swing of how you shoot in hockey. It is much easier for hockey players to transition into golf because of the skill sets and how they line up. Hockey players are naturally better golfers when they go out to the golf course in comparison to other athletes that might not be able to use or just now tapping into certain muscles mentally and physically when they transition to golf. So is there a correlation to hockey players being able to stay healthier as they go throughout a season in comparison to baseball even, or like basketball? I'm just trying to figure it out because it seems like hockey, being as physical as it is, would have more injuries and their stars would be in more danger of not being able to play when the playoffs comes around. But it seems like they don't have that problem. And if they do, it's not as much as a sport like basketball.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation. And my trainer in Southern California worked with a lot of NBA or NHL stars and also Olympic skaters, speed skaters, and figure skaters. And he says the best athletes in the world that he's ever seen out of any sport. Like if you ask him who's the best athlete that you've ever trained, and this guy's trained some of the top athletes in sport, like UFC champions, Super Bowl champions, MLB like stars, NBA stars, NFL stars, I said Super Bowl champion, so that would, I guess, be in the same category. But he says that Nathan Chen, who's the male figure skater, Olympic figure skater, is the most impressive athlete that he's ever seen. And it's a combination of strength, body coordination, like just like proprioception and body awareness. So think about it like almost like a martial art, like times the same kind of tactics that we're training an NFL player for in order to produce power and explosiveness and like all of those things. So with kind of segueing and transitioning that over to hockey athletes, there's a ton of variables to consider in this. First of all, like when you look at hockey athletes, all of them are like my size, like instead of, you know, guys that are above 6 foot. And like, I mean, there's not a lot of that in hockey in comparison to like NBA, NFL. Bigger guys are more likely to get injured, especially with lower leg injuries and things like that. Squattier guys, smaller guys, less likely to have those sort of injuries. I was a running back that got to play at the professional level and never tore like ACL, never like, and I went through some major, I mean, had, I think at Notre Dame still I hold the record for the most consecutive carries, like number 1 and number 2 spot, like for that in a game. I think it was like 15 carries with Purdue, or maybe it was like 13 or something like that, and then 11 with Miami, like in a row. And there's like some scenarios where you're really like banging and like you're tired and everything like that. But I think the way that I was built, like with my anatomy, gives me an advantage with not being injured there. But also I've seen some of the training that these hockey guys are doing. They seem to invest a lot more time in like Pilates, yoga. There's a French pelvic and spinal awareness practice called Aldoa that's big within that ecosystem. And so they're training their fascia and their fascial endurance in ways that we don't train in the NFL. And I think the NBA is starting to get there a little bit. I think they're starting to implement some of this stuff. But again, they're much bigger dudes, like taller. And, you know, when you're banging around on insulated surfaces like a court like that, going back and forth. The good news is they're training both directions. So they're training, like, for example, in football, like if you're offense, you train going this way, like forward. If you're on defense, you train going backwards. And so there's a lot of different muscle groups used like with a DB than there is a wide receiver. And I was actually curious about the correlation between the incidences of Achilles tears in DBs that's much higher versus knee injuries and like wide receivers that seems to be higher than DBs. And so we can see that like with the DBs, they have more strength in their glutes and hamstrings for backpedaling, whereas wide receivers seem to have more strength in their quads and the lateral like components of their body that like change direction. Obviously they're both moving laterally, but again, these core muscle groups of like really hamstring glutes versus, you know, quads and hips. You've got tight quads, tight hips for the wide receiver scenario, which causes a compensation pattern around, I want to call that the midline, like on faster meridians. I may be wrong on that just off the top of my head, but essentially medial hamstring going down to MCL, which ultimately exposes ACL, all of that stuff. And then the lateral line for these DBs is tremendously different, to where they're having to do movements over and over that are exposing and wearing down on their Achilles in ways like they have to constantly push back on that Achilles and snap down into it in ways that you're not doing. You're springing out of it as a receiver, and you're having to like crunch down into it as a DB. And when you crunch down into that really hard and then you try to explode out, that's when the pop happens. So again, like, I guess we could go through lots of other variables on why, you know, those correlations may be happening, but those would kind of be the main things I would say. Is it's more of an anatomy thing more than anything else. Would be, I think, the biggest factor between hockey and football. But then when it comes to like just the initial part of your question, which I always love your questions because they're like, there's like 7 questions in one. And I'm sometimes long-winded when it comes to the recovery aspect side of things. So.
No, we love it. We love it, bro.
But yeah, no, the traveling component, this is professional football now. They said college football is dead as we know it. And like, it totally is. Like, this is like, these guys are professional athletes, just like, we'll call it a lower tier, and they're associated with, you know, colleges because they go to school there or whatever. But like, these guys got contracts and they have agents, they're doing deals. It may be different in some respects to, you know, the NFL and some of these other professional leagues out there that do American football. But yeah, it's a whole new ball game, and I choose to know how it's all going to look. Could it totally impact injuries in a significant way? Of course. Yeah. Like, that's it. But any sport, I would say, like, anytime I've ever played, like in a season through any sport, the end of the year is always like where your body is worn out. Like, it's hurting, and I think it was like Luka and Kyrie were talking in game 2 or whatever. And Luka like looked at Kyrie, was like, I'm hurting. Like, and he said, that's how it's supposed to be. and I just think that's awesome. Like, that's part of why we love it too. Like, as gladiators in the sport, we love the concept of like fighting through that pain and that adversity and getting to the end. And like, the championship moment is glorious because you overcame all of that, no matter what that ended up looking like.
Do you think
Michael Finley's a hater, by the way? He took the beer out of Luka's hands.
No. That if you're in the Dallas area, that was layered. That was a layered decision that Michael Finley made. Well, we could talk about that off air. That wasn't just.
He's like, whoa, he ain't won yet.
That's a layered decision. That was about winning, but that was also like, yo, relax, man.
Yo, relax.
Relax. Lucky Lefty podcast. Skating, NHL.
Okay.
Someone in the chat made a very interesting observation. Like, you don't hear about ACLs. There are some ACL injuries in the NHL from spending time around the Blackhawks when I was at WGN here in Chicago. Yeah. But with them being off of their feet and skating, that probably lends itself to the muscle or the knee giving way during contact rather than being planted.
Yeah.
You know,
they're not getting stuck.
Yeah.
Like, we're getting tangled and stuck like in the turf in the same way. And then, yeah, their ability to leave the ground actually, like upon contact, they'll if you get hit the right way in hockey, like you're down, like on the ground, and you've got pads all over you. Like, their whole body is insulated. That's another factor. So they're lower center of gravity, covered in pads. And hockey is a tough sport. Like, anybody that has played hockey will tell you, like it is not, and the way that they do like those shifts, that's just another thing, like on the recovery times, like the way that I kind of have understood hockey, and I've never played hockey, so I don't have that experiential knowledge. I've just had the hockey players kind of explain to me like how they do this, but they're going out there and it's almost like a track athlete running a 400, and then they're getting off and then they're coming back, like they'll rest and then they'll come back on type of thing. So totally different sort of like endurance factor as well, even than basketball, because in basketball, like you kind of like turn that energy on, turn it off, like as you're going transitioning like back and forth across the court. Like hockey just seems to move at a pace that you're not able to turn it off nearly as much when you're on that small, compact little ice rink and you're moving as fast as you are.
And the shift times, I think, look, Luka, Kyrie, the guys that play the most, LeBron, AD, they're playing what, 36 to 38, even 40 plus minutes a night on a consistent basis. I think the top shift time in hockey is probably around 25 to 30 minutes a night. You know, in a 60-minute game.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. That's, man, when you think about that, the way they shift in and out is short burst. That's really what it is. Burst, give me a good 2 minutes, get off.
Yep.
Come in, give me another good 2-3 minutes, get off.
Like come in hard.
But that's what I was saying. You can't. It's because of the amount of gear and the fact that I was telling Shaun this, ice is the great equalizer. If you can only go so hard on ice before you just don't have balance. And because you have so much equipment, how physical can you really get to put you in a situation like an ACL in football or the heavy impact on the knees like in basketball? So
I think the culture.
The most interesting comparison would probably be like rugby. Like that's where I would be like, because you got more. And so think of it like with football, like we're talking about short bursts. Like there is no short burst like football. Like football is the shortest of bursts. Like we're talking 4-second plays. Boom! Like as hard as you can go in a 4-second like scenario. Like we are creating massive amounts of force and taught and trained to create massive amounts of force in a very small window of time. And then you rest 30, 45 seconds. Like, and obviously that can change with the pace of the offense and things like that. But like we have that intermittent rest time in ways that is unique to any other like sport out there, especially a contact sport. So when we come, like when our guys come, when a safety comes down, flies down and just smacks you in the face, like there's no sort of force like that in any other sport that I feel like you can really replicate. Like we're talking about rugby players not wearing, you know, pads and stuff. Like, okay, like I get that. And I do think rugby is an extremely tough sport, but they're running around the whole time. It's like soccer and football like mixed together. So there's not the same sort of energy and force production on these hits and stuff like that. So, yeah, totally different dynamic, I would say.
How does pace of play into this? Because very interesting, I think, when they put the pitch clock in to increase pace of play in Major League Baseball, injuries in pitchers elevated, right?
Yeah.
Now, of course, they did this for the fans to make it a better product, to move games along, and that happened. I think games were cut by like 15 minutes in actual time, and it plays better on TV, it plays better in person. But now you see the injuries that are coming because it was a difference in pace that pitchers were used to operating in. They had to get used to that. Their muscles weren't used to that. You see an uptick in shoulder injuries and elbow injuries. This is what I worry about with the uptick, with the addition of these games and the shortening of the rest time. Like you said, you get to the end of the football season in college, you're worn out.
Yeah.
Like you're vulnerable. But now, instead of resting for the bowl game, now you got to ramp it back up.
Yeah.
A little bit quicker. And that is my concern and where it comes from with the pace of play. I think the NBA, size of the athlete, which you pointed out, but also the difference in pace of play from now to where it was back in the 80s and 90s, there's a tremendous gap. And how much faster the game is played.
Yeah.
And that's because the skill set, now it's just really pick and roll much more than it was set offenses 20 years ago. In your opinion, in you guys' opinion, has the pace of play in football, whether it's college or the pros, is the difference that significant now from when you guys play as you watch it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Even from like the time that I was a little boy and like watching NFL to like what it is now. I was talking with some of my friends about Reggie Bush and how like Reggie is like top 5 college running back of all time, like just like freak cheat code of an athlete. And how in the NFL, like he had a good career, but like what would his career be like if he played in the NFL right now? Like I think this guy is one of the best players in the league, like hands down, like in today's NFL, because of the versatility and the change of pace and the ability. Like that's the thing that's different. I feel like in the 90s and like early 2000s, it was like this ground and pound and like a lot of pro style, a lot of under center kind of concepts. And then, you know, we start to see the evolution of the game coming in with like more offenses, like running shotgun and like spread and more fast pace. Like you get the Texas, like I grew up in Big 12 football. So like Texas Tech, like watching those guys just air it out and having the quarterbacks that are just blowing like everybody else's yards per game, like out of the water because of like the Houstons and the Texas Techs that are just airing it out all like, and a lot of the fast paced offense that goes with that. And then I would say just in this last, like, you know, 10 to 15 years, really the last 10 years, it's been like, you'll see some of that, but then you'll see like somebody just jump into the wishbone or something like that and run some crazy play that you never would have. I mean, just the creativity that's happening now is like, if you're throwing these different looks, more change-ups, almost like if we're using like baseball analogies, it's like there's more capacity for change-ups and being creative with players. And you got people like Deebo Samuel, who like kind of was an archetype for breaking down what it like limiting like players to positions and moving them around in ways that maybe we're not as familiar with, like seeing even like the concept of when we were in college, Malik, like, did they even have a concept for an edge? Was that even a term? No. Like on defense, like we didn't, that was an outside linebacker. Like that's what we called those guys.
Stand up. He's a stand-up backer.
Yeah, you had a defensive end and you had an outside linebacker. Like there was no such thing as an edge to us.
Shimbo was my first experience, and then Shimbo, then Romeo was my first experience to that outside linebacker that was a D lineman, but not a D lineman.
Yeah, yeah. So it was there, but like the terminology is different now. Like they actually recruit players like for that position in a way that like it wasn't there before. So, man, there's a lot of change and a lot of change.
You start talking about that joker position. What's a joker position? Star position.
Oh, dude. Yeah, Rover, Viper, they have all these different determinations for dudes. Like, does he rush the quarterback or does he drop? Like, what
does he drop?
What's his assignment? It's real simple. Football doesn't change, but I guess, like you said, as it evolves, and you get these different play calls and ways to attack, because the defenses have to figure out how to attack these offenses. As the rule changes, give more advantages to the offense. Left doesn't believe that. He'll never believe that. He always feels like the offense is at a disadvantage, but
they are.
Well, you feel like the offense is at the disadvantage based off
Absolutely.
Based off of the rules?
Absolutely.
I feel like the rules, especially in the NFL, are tailored to offensive production.
I mean, the only thing that's on the fringe for me is the tackles, only because they've been used as game-changing type of plays. So I don't agree with the quarterback tackles necessarily because it's been too subjective, and it's like, okay, I mean, but other than that, I think the rules definitely gear more towards the defense, just because offensively, there's only so much you can and can't do. Defensively, you just gotta keep your head up. I mean, let's be serious. Just keep your head up. Don't be scared. See what you're hitting. You don't go in the box and duck your head. So they just trying to tell defensive guys to wake up a little bit.
Well, you always have an interesting perspective, so I'll give you that. I feel like they make these rules so that there's more points like being scored. So it seems like it's in the favor of the offense to me. But I respect your position. So,
but the change of speed, though, I mean, I think the change of speed is because of the natural ability of the athletes overall. Kids are taking training very seriously at 8 years old.
Yeah,
I took it serious, but I mean, hell, I was playing other sports. I was, after school doing these kids wake up and go to sleep training. And I'm like, that's gonna be tough doing it for 30 years down.
Do you think that within itself is dangerous moving forward? Like young kids training at one thing instead of allowing their bodies to experience play different sports and operate in different core muscles being used, which gives them more flexibility. That seems to be kind of dangerous moving forward for these young athletes as well.
Yeah. My biggest thing on that is just that you take out the component of what sport was made for at the beginning, which is play. And if you take that away from a child or a kid, you take out the component of play and it becomes a mission, like a business, like too early. You will experience cycles of burnout fairly quickly with those athletes, more from a mental and emotional, like what Luck was saying, like good luck doing that for 30 years of your life. Like
you get burned.
It's like it wears you out, man. Like the fact that you're giving so much of your time, energy, and effort to
something you can't control. Because you do all that work and then they politics of the game play in, and you can't do nothing about how they recruited, and now you bad. You done spent 20 years and getting like 2 seconds of it's just too much.
Totally. There's a lot of variables within the game that are kind of out of control of the athlete, and I was one of those kids that I did 3 sports, really 4 sports. So baseball, track, soccer, football. And I loved those sports, man. Like I wanted to be like, a Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders kind of hybrid and play baseball and football, like when I was a really young kid. And I was so enthusiastic about baseball, played catch every day. Like my dad played catch with me in the yard all the time. And I had one bad experience with a coach, like switching from coach pitch to like regular baseball. And I was done.
Done.
Because I was spending so much time on baseball, and to have one season where I move cities and I'm like in my, like the hometown that I was in before, I was like the dude. And then I moved to another town and like, they don't know me. And I'm like trying to reorient myself, playing new position, all that stuff. It's getting more serious because now it's like, it's not coach pitch. And this is all like really young. So it wasn't that big of a deal necessarily. It was just, and something that I probably could have fought through from an adversity standpoint. But for me, it was like, I'm spending so much time on this, so much energy on this. And to have that scenario happen just made me feel like this isn't worth it, because I've got, like, I love soccer, like right now, like I love like track, and like I'm enjoying track, and I love football. So it's all, I guess, just part of the process of sport. I love seeing the renaissance of multi-sport athletes coming back, because I think that we kind of went through that phase really from maybe the last 20 years or so. And it's not like it still happens. There's always going to be like hyper performance. That's what I would call it, is hyper performance or premature performance kind of training. But I'm loving seeing the renaissance of like play coming back, and play is the best thing for these young athletes. Like, we don't understand that. It's not the technical, tactical like training and like all the form and everything like that. Like, creativity does not happen from there. Like, you will stifle a kid's creativity if like you're focusing on all of the mechanics and stuff like that at too early of an age.
Just too early of an age.
Yeah. And just look at the mental toll of what we, like, even with somebody like a Tiger who does go through that whole scenario and ends up being the greatest golfer of all time. Incredible. But like, what was the price of that? Like,
do you think that the pressure, the whole sense of pressure making diamonds is a applicable thing for athletes? And I just think the complexity of an athlete is just so much more than if I'm just on your ass all day. If I give you the worst circumstances of adversity to deal with, equation wise, you're supposed to be the greatest of all time, but a lot more times than not, it does not work out like that.
Totally. It's kind of the concept of, did you ever watch Whiplash, the movie Whiplash? With the, the jazz drummer. That's the epitome of like what you're talking about, right? It's this like teacher was so obsessed with the concept of creating greatness that he was willing to push people to have mental breakdowns, and ultimately that led to people killing themselves over like how messed up like it made them in the head.
That was the wrestling movie, right?
No, it was he was a jazz drummer.
Oh yes. Yeah. It's like a weird, like, it's band camp on steroids type thing.
Yeah. So does it produce greatness? Yeah, like it can.
But is it? We have to maybe define it as a different term.
Is it
because greatness can come in different ways?
Yeah,
that version of greatness is it's like Michael Jackson and his Joe Jackson.
It sounds like what you guys are talking about, or being aggressive in the stock market versus being patient and just betting on the S&P 500, which is undefeated historically. Like, just be patient, depend on the S&P 500 for 15 to 20 years, and you're going to come out okay. You're going to be in great shape. Or you can go high risk all the time.
Yeah.
You might hit, but if you hit, at what cost? Because one of those risks might bottom out, and you could end up losing it all. So, I love it. Lucky Lefty podcast. Before we get out of here, guys, I want to give an update. Irish Invasion, juniors and sophomores from all over the nation invade Notre Dame on Sunday. 2026 wide receiver Nasir Rankin is a player to watch from Morgan Park, my alma mater, Umpy High. 26 tight end Landon Myrie. One of these Cincinnati guys. Left always loves the Cincinnati guys. From Princeton out there. 26 offensive lineman from Leesburg, Virginia. Carter Scruggs, he's going to be in town. 26 Maryville, Indiana. Andrean offensive lineman Benjamin Novak is a player to watch. Why does that sound familiar? That is the school that produced middle linebacker Drake Bowen. This kid already left. 6'6", 320 already left. So I don't know where they're making these kids. I don't know what factory these kids are coming from. He's a junior, 6'6", 320. 6'6", 320. Man, look, and then Flowood, Missouri. Once again, we go to that St. Louis pipeline for safety Brian Womack. He's going to be in town. And then there are going to be a bunch of 27 quarterbacks. I think in the next week or so, the 26th quarterback is going to be figured out by Notre Dame. That's my expectation. So the 27 quarterbacks coming will take center stage this Sunday. Gino will be out there. Shout out to my boy Trey Taylor, Carmel High School from Mundelein, Illinois, right outside of Lake Forest, the headquarters of Chicago Bears. He is coached by former teammate of Marcus Freeman on the Chicago Bears, former Chicago Bear fullback Jason McKee. Got a chance to talk to J Mac earlier today about Trey Taylor. We're going to watch his film later on tonight, Left. We're going to break down. I told you yesterday, he reminds me of Charlie Ward in so many ways. I'll get a chance to hear your thoughts on him. Peter Bork, Charlie Folk, Zach Katz, and Jackson Smith are some of the other quarterbacks that will be on campus. Cam, I don't know if you have time tonight. We would love to have you. We doubled up all week because we took last week off. So we've been doing 2-a-days all week. We'll be back with you tonight. What time left? Because I want to give you time to go out and kick it out there on the West Coast. What do you want to do? You want to do what? 4 o'clock your time?
4 o'clock. Perfect.
Does that sound good? 4 o'clock your time. So that means that's 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern. We'll be back. We're going to dig in a little bit more on the impact of this injury with Bran Payne. I'm going to dig and see when it happened because they really haven't talked about if it happened during the spring game or in workouts after that. And then we're going to dig into, the size of these athletes. 6'6", 320? What the? We're going to watch some film on all the athletes we talked about, too. 6'6", 320 is out. He's a junior, bro.
Yeah, he's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, man. Lucky Lefty podcast. We thank our guy Cam McDaniel for joining us. And we'll be back tonight, man, to dig in a little bit more. Have a great Friday. But most of all, make sure you continue to spin it different. Hey, you can follow me. I'm about to go over to the recruiting hour where we preview the Irish invasion and all of the commits from the 25 class and the 26 and 27 kids coming to campus. Official visit season is here. Let's get it in. Spin it different.